Hey, remember the other week when I bought those bananas? Well, they've been sitting on top of my fridge and getting old and brown. I believe I mentioned in that video that I was planning to make banana bread with them, or I was going to freeze them and use them for this frozen banana dessert thing. And I decided I wanted to make banana bread. And they are getting quite old. They're old to the point where when you try and pick them up, you can almost feel like you're going to push right through the skin. So that's good. They should be very brown and very ripe. The riper a banana gets, like these, the sweeter the banana tastes. And that's necessary kind of for the banana bread. It helps with the taste of the bread and kind of getting that banana flavor across. So you take your bananas, you peel them, stick them in a bowl, mash them with a fork. They don't have to be perfect puree. You just mash them up. And because these bananas are so ripe and they're so old, they mash pretty well. They turn into a liquid. When you first start smashing them, it doesn't seem to be doing much. But if you just smash them for a couple seconds, 5-10 seconds, they start to turn very mushy and pureed. If I was a baby, I'd want mashed bananas. Tastes very good. So you get yourself about 1.5 cups of those. The angle on this photo makes it a little bit, makes it look like it's almost 2 cups, but it's not quite that high. It is a little bit more than 1.5 cups. I think it was like 1 2/3 cup. So then you gather up the rest of your ingredients. You get yourself some whole wheat flour, nutmeg, cinnamon, unsweetened applesauce. Instead of we'll get to the applesauce in just a moment. Baking soda, honey, vanilla extract, mashed bananas, 2 large eggs, chopped or crushed walnuts, and, of course, brown sugar, because it tastes so good. So this is applesauce and brown sugar. The original recipe for this calls for 1/2 cup of butter. Now, when you're baking, I don't know to what degree it works for cookies, but certainly for banana bread, you can substitute applesauce for butter or oil when you're making cakes or banana bread or brownies or any other of those batter-based baked goods. And it basically just cuts a lot of the fat and calories from the recipe, and at least I don't notice any difference in taste. I've made this banana bread, I think, 2 or 3 times using unsalted butter, and I've made it, I think this is the 3rd or 4th time I've made it with applesauce, and I can't taste the difference at all. The applesauce doesn't really add any flavor to the bread. Its purpose, kind of like the butter, is to keep the bread moist and make sure that it stays, it has that moistness to it. So keep it moist, have that moistness to it. Anyway, you substitute applesauce for butter or oil on a 1-to-1 basis. So instead of 1/2 cup of butter, this is 1/2 cup of applesauce with 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And then you add a 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, which is what this brown stuff is on top of the applesauce. Both of the powders stayed here, and then this is all vanilla extract in the background. And then you go ahead and blend. You beat that together until it's smooth. And at this point, it actually smells a lot like cinnamon applesauce because there's cinnamon and applesauce in it. So then you add your mashed bananas. That's 1.5 cups-ish of bananas, 3 to 4 overripe bananas. 1/4 cup of honey and 2 large eggs. And you beat that together until it is smooth. At this point, it's a very liquidy concoction because pretty much everything you've put into it is a liquid. And so it turns a bit frothy from the eggs, but it beats together rather well. So then on top of that, I sprinkle 2 cups of whole wheat flour. You're going to mix the flour in a moment, so I don't dump them all into like one giant pile. I just kind of spread it out over the top. And then you're supposed to use about 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts. I used however much was in there. It was probably closer to 2/3 or maybe even, I don't think 3/4. I think about 2/3 ish of a cup. So once again, just kind of some. So toss that on top. Now you mix it together. I have I think I mentioned in one of the other videos that I have a stiff spatula. It's like a hard plastic spatula. That's what I use for most of the mixing part. And then I use a softer rubber spatula to actually scrape it out of the bowl. But when I read it, and I don't know to what degree this is true, they said just stir it together to combine. That's it. You're not supposed to continue like beating it together or whipping it or over mixing it. You mix it up just enough so that everything's wet. So here you can see that I don't have any dry flour visible. And then you're done. Stop. That's the end of it. So you don't use, your beater, your mixer, electric mixer / egg beater to mix this together, because that's over mixing it. Now, I was told that you don't over mix it because it's supposed to make it better, the texture or something. I don't know. I've never over mixed it. I've always done just what the recipe says, which is mix it just enough so that everything's wet, like we see here, and then you're done. So then you get yourself a 9x5 loaf pan and you grease it. You can use the spray. You can use oil, which is, this is high heat canola oil, which is what I used. Canola oil, I don't remember exactly where its smoke point is, but they make a specific high heat canola oil, which can be used for cooking. Baking should be fine using any kind of, I think baking using regular canola oil should be fine. Usually the high heat canola oil is specifically for use in like a wok or a skillet or a saucepan, things like that, where there might be a risk of smoke reaching the smoke point. You can use olive oil, especially if you have like a light olive oil that doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. Like I said, you can use a cooking spray. The first time I made this banana bread, I actually used part of the stick of butter that didn't go into the recipe to grease the pan. I don't recommend that as much because the butter, it will cook and cause the outside of the loaf to become crispy and actually stick to the pan. So this is me. I just used a plastic sandwich bag to spread it on the pan. So then you pour it in, and you don't need to smooth it out. You don't need to shake the pan to level it off for the, this is just right out of the bowl, right into the pan, and then right into the oven. Your oven should be preheated to 350 degrees. You stick it in the oven for 50 minutes. And at the end of 50 minutes, that's 50 minutes, you take it. You don't take it out. I took it out to take a picture of it. Bam. That's 50 minutes later. At 50 minutes, you put a piece of aluminum foil over the top of it. Now, you don't have to crimp it down. You just need to lay it over the top. And essentially what that does is it prevents the top from browning any further. Because this is essentially browned enough. Now you just need to finish cooking it. And so by placing the foil over the top, it prevents it from getting overly dark. So I don't show a picture of the foil because literally I just open the oven, put the piece of foil over the top of the pan, and then I'm done. If the bread is sticking up over the top of the pan at all, you just tent the foil. Take the piece of foil, kind of fold it in half-ish so that it forms a V shape, an upside-down V, and then stick it on top, like the roof of a house. So anyway, you put it back in the oven and you leave it in for 10 to 15 more minutes. So a total cooking time of 60 to 65 minutes. By the way, this is it 10 minutes later. Notice how it's not, I mean, it's got a little bit shinier, darker bit to it, but not really. And then you stick a knife into it. Well, I stick a knife in. If you have a skewer or a toothpick's not going to work. This is too thick for a toothpick. But if you have a skewer, bamboo skewer, a wooden skewer, any kind of long, thin implement you can use, you stab it into the bread and see if it's done. So here I stabbed it in. You can see that there's still some liquid at the very bottom here. So I say liquid. It's wet and there's some stuff stuck to the very bottom of the knife. It's not coming out really clean. So you stick it back in the oven for 10 minutes and then you check it again, and if it's still not done, you put it back in. The knife doesn't have to come out perfectly clean. You can see that most of this is right here at the tip of the knife, so it's kind of the very bottom of the pan. And then you can see that there's little bits kind of stuck up above. I don't know if it's because I'm using applesauce, but sometimes the inside of the bread will be a little bit moist compared to when I made it with butter. What you're really making sure of is that there's not a bunch of wet batter coming out. So in this case, I put it back in the oven for 10 more minutes. And when it came out of, when it comes out of the oven for the final time, you leave it sit in the pan for 10 minutes. And that's because it's still kind of finishing cooking, or baking, not cooking. Then you take it out of the pan, stick it on a rack, and let it cool. So this is the loaf on the rack, and you can see the knife hole from my butter knife going in. And just to let you know how well the pan works when you just oil it, that is the pan after I dumped the bread out. I did at first use this pie server and just went around the edges, but honestly, I could tell as I was moving it around the edge that it was not touching anything in the pan. And you can see that it came out like super clean. There's, I think, little bits. I mean, these are just crumbs. I think there's a little bit like right here is something stuck to the pan, but really that loaf just came plop right out. So that's an awesome loaf. Oh, and by the way, I ate a piece of it and it is delicious. So, bam! Ugly, ugly bananas make delicious, delicious bread. Until next time, bye-bye.